Recently, an event featuring the writer Viet Thanh Nguyen at the 92nd Street Y, one of New York's leading cultural institutions, was canceled. The organizers cited Nguyen's public criticism of Israel. It's just one example of how the Israel-Hamas war is roiling cultural and educational organizations in this country. The Vietnamese-born Pulitzer Prize-winning author has long written of themes of war, refugees, and exile, now most directly and personally in a new memoir about his own family's experience. Jeffrey Brown spoke with Nguyen about a man of two faces before this conflict started for our Arts and Culture series, Canvas.
A favorite? Yeah.
On a recent afternoon just outside Los Angeles, Viet Thanh Nguyen brought us to Golden Deli, a favorite Vietnamese restaurant, to try the fried spring rolls and talk of exile, secrecy, divided identity, the lives and histories that have made him a man of two faces, the name of his new memoir.
When I was growing up, my parents told me that I was 100% Vietnamese.
100%.
100%.
Yeah.
And whenever they said American, they meant other people, not us.
Yeah.
So they definitely wanted me to stay Vietnamese. The United States was where we lived, but it wasn't, I think, their idea of a permanent home. And it wasn't.
I mean, literally, like they thought they might go back, or you might go back, or
I think a lot of people.
Somehow,
yeah. I think a lot of refugees think that way. I mean, you obviously have to live here and work and survive. And my parents became citizens.
Survival was a central theme of his family's life. His parents were born in the 1930s during the French colonization of Vietnam. They moved to the South in 1954, and then in 1975, when Nguyen was 4, fled to the U.S., refugees twice over. They eventually settled in San Jose, California, dealing with traumas physical, including a holdup at the grocery store his parents owned in which they were shot and injured, and psychological, never quite leaving the past behind. We continued our talk at his Pasadena home.
For me, history was really present because I felt that history was rippling through all of us Vietnamese refugees, through our bodies and our emotions, because we wouldn't speak about history necessarily in the house, but people would be angry, people would be sad, people would be torn up by all these emotions, not just my family, but every other family I ever interacted with.
Stories became a way to both escape and forge his own identity through the books he read and eventually his own writing.
I had to not acknowledge to my parents that what I really wanted to be was a writer, because I felt that writing was how I could save myself and also hopefully save them in some way, like save their stories and in some way impact the country in which I was living and growing up in.
That puts a lot of weight on you as a writer.
A self-imposed weight.
Self-imposed,
right?
Which you feel.
I feel because I believe stories can do all these things.
His debut novel, The Sympathizer, about a North Vietnamese spy in the South Vietnamese Army who then lives among the U.S. refugee community, took in all this history. The new memoir borrows from its opening line, "I am a spy, a sleeper, a spook, a man of two faces."
Growing up as a refugee in San Jose, California, and I felt like a man of two faces. I was an American spying on my Vietnamese parents, but I was a Vietnamese person spying on Americans when I stepped out of the house. And so with this memoir, the only way I could really write it was to imagine the sympathizer writing about me. I had to, again, pretend I was someone else writing about me to gain some distance from myself, because part of the subject of this book is how difficult it is for us to know ourselves, or at least it's difficult for me to know myself.
And how difficult for what he terms America TM to know itself and its often destabilizing role in the world. There's a sharp political critique here. Also of how popular culture, the movies most of all, shape and distort our sense of history, other people, and war itself. Indeed, Nguyen refers to his memoir as a war story, just not in the way we typically think of one.
In the 20th century, wars killed more civilians than killed soldiers. So why are civilian stories not typically thought of as war stories? And so when I think about the fact that my family was displaced, that it was fractured, that we left people behind, that my parents' lives were destroyed and had to rebuild them, to me, even though my parents were never soldiers, these are war stories.
One person left behind, an older sister.
I didn't even realize I had a sister until we got a letter from her when I was like 9 years old. Never came up. So that
And
was
you
how
realized
history was present.
she had been left behind.
Yeah, and who was this person? And what happened to our family? What are the what have we never talked about? And so that was really a defining element of my life, is trying to figure out how the personal conflicts and emotions and anxieties that are present in all families were present in my family, but they were shaped also by this terrible, terrible history.
It's a history that deeply affected his mother, who died in 2018. Nguyen presents her as a successful, self-made woman, but one who also struggled with mental illness.
Went to the psychiatric hospital 3 times in her life. That was never something we talked about outside of the family, so she definitely had 2 faces there. Her illness will always be a mystery, because what happens inside of us, who knows what combination of genetics and psychology leads to this kind of experience. But I also surmise, I can guess, that everything she underwent as someone who grew up in 40 years of war and colonization and being a refugee twice and being separated from her family, not seeing her siblings for 25 years, not being there when her own mother passed away. Her mother passed away in Vietnam when she was in the United States. That must have had an impact on her, must have shook her.
I knew you first as a fiction writer. What was it like to write about yourself?
Writing about myself was very difficult. That's why I had to create some distance between my persona and me. What does it mean to delve into these family experiences that were so painful? And so I think that, in fact, become a better writer, but also hopefully a better human being, a better father, because I could finally engage with these things that have been so difficult for me to confront for 30 and 40 years. And then in the penultimate chapter, the book addresses my own children. They're 10 and 3. Maybe one day they'll read the book, or maybe they'll never read the book. I have no idea. But it was very important for me in that chapter to say, I hope they never feel the need to write a memoir. But if they do, they have my blessing.
The memoir, A Man of Two Faces, was longlisted for this year's National Book Award. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Jeffrey Brown in Pasadena, California.